Her name was Rajyalakshmi Chitrakar. She was the wife of Nepal's former Prime Minister Jhalanath Khanal. She was not a policymaker. She did not run the country of Nepal. She existed. She was inside her home. And when they burnt it down with her inside. And there have been tens of thousands of people on the internet watching her body burned, being carried, watching her dying, and saying that it was necessary. Because they called it revolution, the murder of innocents, that society itself is supposed to at least seek justice for the innocent, not by sacrificing them. But they said it's not just vibes and essays. And so they murdered women and they burned their bodies for merely existing. It is not isolated to Nepal. In Bangladesh, they hunted the Hindus. They called them traitors for associating with a political party they disagreed with, but mostly they just called them Hindus, and they called them women, and they burnt them, they raped them. They raped them in gangs, and they tore their bodies apart. They drowned them, and they called it revolution. This is not a bug. This is what happens when order collapses. When they go into the houses of their presidents, into the houses of their leaders, and they parade underwear, they lounge in pools that are built from the money that the taxpayers paid. They are not setting a standard for a new society. They're just destroying any progress that has been made by them just a while ago, by their own ancestors. Across the Indian subcontinent, each country seems to have its own story of apparent revolution in recent times, but the patterns are exceedingly similar. The destruction is accompanied by music, memes, mobs, violence, and utter societal collapse. 2022, Sri Lanka gave us Argalaya. The Argalaya movement was called People's Power. It was supported by NGOs, amplified by foreign media attention. It was led by the youth, and it weaponized unusual things: satire, music. There were performances at the Kota Gugama where young rappers and comedians and leaders were born and reborn as leaders of a movement that aimed to give power to its people, to its youth. But did they? But democracy is not anarchy. A true democracy runs on the basis of order and on the basis of civil trust. Without society, without a sense of ordered, considerate, civil, trustful society that builds and nurtures institutions, all democracy fails. Yet, they called anarchy that they instigated the true face of democracy. It was theatre, it was not even political theatre, it was sheer theatre involving so much of the same elements of dramatic music, of suddenly intense satirical poetry, of rap, of memes, leading on mobs. Only 2 years later, it was Bangladesh. Sheikh Hasina, from a prominent Bangladeshi political family, had finally led her country to some amount of economic success. If you went to the United Kingdom, if you went to the United States and you shopped for clothes, it was normal to see so many of them being made in Bangladesh. Were there no problems? Of course not. It was a government. It was made of people. It was made of probably corrupt leaders. But did the country progress? Was it stable for some time? In a region that is generally politically volatile, was there a sense of peace in the everyday? The data says there was. Sheikh Hasina was visited by representatives of the United States. Bangladesh was apparently being urged to give access to the States to St. Martin's Island, a militarily important geographical entity. Sheikh Hasina mentioned that she was approached by a white man to bargain for the island. She refused as the leader of a sovereign nation. Soon after, protests swept the streets. Suddenly, the element involved in the protest seemed eerily familiar. There was rap music. Shah's rap anthem Kotha Ko swept the streets and was played over and over during the protests. Hanan Hussain Shimul's Awaz Utha became a rallying cry for protesters. But it wasn't just words and vibes and essays now. So the music gave way to blood, and it happened extremely quickly. Not only were the leaders of the Awami League, which was the government in power, which was Sheikh Hasina's party, hunted and lynched, their families brought out of their homes, and some of them escaped, many of them were killed. But Christians and Hindus were brought out of their homes, driven out of the areas that they lived in, lynched to death, women gang raped in public. Muhammad Yunus, a darling of the US Democrat Party, the US left, an apparent pioneer in microfinances who has been accused of extreme fraud, not just by Bangladesh, but by Norway, by other Western nations, for defrauding the most destitute, the poorest of his nation, the women. These were extremely poor women, by the way. Muhammad Yunus, this man was then brought in as the leader, as the new leader. This man, one of the only Bangladeshis well known in the West, as part of his association with the US, was suddenly flown in and became the interim chief of a nation he did not understand, of a nation he sought to defraud. And suddenly, student leaders who had led the movement actually became political leaders, gaining their pound of flesh, while mobs rampaged around them. Sheikh Hasina's residence was not just broken into, but her underwear paraded, as if that were a sign of civil society. Protest and loot and murder and lynching are defined as violation of human rights. However, when it comes disguised as revolution, they are accepted as a sign of plain human dissatisfaction, revealing itself in blood. And this happened somehow right around election time, an election that the opposition party boycotted because it did not think that it would win. Now, led by the Islamist faction that continues to hunt down any Hindus left in Bangladesh, they remain in power. The country's economy has obviously not recovered, but is in a downward spiral as the rest of the world descends into chaos as well. And then, shortly after, it is 2025, and Indonesia burns. This was supposed to be different. The protest started earlier. 2024 saw lots of riots in Jakarta. The spark was not merely a rally against corruption. It was now against nepotism, an element of corruption. Specifically, Joko Widodo, who had been the president of Indonesia and had built his legacy on the development of his nation, had entered his son Gibran Raka as vice president to run alongside Prabowo Subianto, usually just addressed as Prabowo. This was a general with a dark record, and many Indonesians saw this as a dynastic sort of politics that reeked of nepotism, corruption, and that would not lead them ahead. Their response, again, is rather similar to what was happening in the Indian subcontinent. The All Indonesian Students' Union, or BEMSI, led protests. There were symbols to rally around. The one-piece flag became a phenomenon. Women with pink brooms swept the streets as a symbol of sweeping away corruption. And in such volatile times, tragedy struck, and it struck hard. A police vehicle killed a delivery worker, and the fire was lit. But the heavy-handed crackdowns in order to preserve a semblance of order and enable these priorities brought about extreme tragedy. And now, Nepal burns. Hami Nepal, funded by Coca-Cola and the US Asian Legal Defense Fund. Once again, music was rather front and center because Shah, or Balen, a rapper, arose as the leader of the protests, along with Sudhan Gurung. Balen is now the mayor of Kathmandu and also met with the US ambassador. There was satire, there was rap, and there were memes, and there were mobs. While Jhalanath Khanel's wife, Rajyalakshmi Chitrakar, was burnt to death, Finance Minister Vishnu Prasad Paudel was lynched while on the streets and hunted like prey. He escaped and lives while Chitrakar is dead. The riots are being dubbed as Gen Z protests. It's a very misleading term. Gen Z dampens the blow, as if these are mere dissatisfied youth. National security preserves the lives of all of its citizens. And when the Nepal government shut down the internet, shut down social media in order to prevent exactly these uprisings, they came out on the streets, ravaging any development that had happened, burning down monuments and temples and buildings that were paid for through their own taxes. General Ashok Raj Sigdal, friend of Beijing and the PLA, assumed command. The playbook for such protests is not new. It's very, very old and battle-tested. In Serbia in 2000, the student movement Otpor brought down Slobodan Milosevic. Their tools? Graffiti, satire, music, rap music in particular. The clenched fist symbol became famous worldwide as a symbol of protest against authoritarianism. Otpor student leaders, including Sergei Popovich, then founded Canvas. It was the Center for Applied Nonviolent Action and Strategies, essentially a playbook to bring down governments through protests. Were they truly nonviolent, though? As can be seen, that is not how protests work once order is taken away. Riots, lynch mobs, they develop a life of their own. From Belgrade, Canvas trained activists worldwide. Their methods appeared in Ukraine then. The Orange Revolution of 2004, the Maidan protests of 2014. Youth networks, music, rap music in particular. Comedy sketches mocking leaders. And then Popovich met Indian political activist and politician Yogendra Yadav in 2016. Yadav was a member of the AAP party, or the Aam Aadmi party, which arose very similarly as a response to corruption entrenched in Indian politics, but then becoming extremely corrupt themselves. From Belgrade to Kiev, and then from Colombo to Dhaka to Kathmandu, the echoes are too strong to ignore. It requires a lot of pattern recognition and actual context If you wish to read more on the matter and to be better informed than just the headlines, then read the material linked below and inform yourselves to make this a matter of conviction rather than a matter of gossip over tea time, because this involves the lives of real people and it should be treated with a level of some seriousness. Civilization depends on order, on trust between human beings. When order collapses, trust is its first victim and savagery follows soon after. What we're seeing today is the deliberate unleashing of such primal instincts that defy civilized society. And while the nations affected may claw their way back to order someday, the echoes of the destabilization are felt for generations across lifetimes. The economic disasters that unfold are extremely hard to overcome, even over decades. But do the people participating in the protests know about this? They are caught up in their own worlds, believing themselves to be the sole victims of something that has happened across countries over decades. That has been orchestrated to a certain point, using organic dissatisfaction, weaponizing it for foreign interests. Governments across the world have also collapsed. France and Japan have seen their leaders resign and others be elected. There are protests on the streets in France as well. However, their president is still within the country. There has been a relatively smoother transition between leaders. Japan, they've cited the humiliating trade deal with the US as one of the many reasons, but dissatisfaction with the economy and the growth of the nation has always been a concern in recent times. But these follow a different set of rules. They follow actual rules, more democratic rules, not those of anarchy. Around the Indian subcontinent, though, as the battlefield between China and the US, the two largest economies in the world, with India caught in the center and its subcontinent ravaged by riots, we see a completely different playbook for the transition of power. Just as India and Africa were once laboratories for untested vaccines and genetically modified crops and seeds, today they seem to have become laboratories of regime change. Experiments are run, chaos is tested, lives are lost. Chinese games are slightly more deliberate. They are overt. Death traps, bargains for military establishments, withholding of vaccines in times of need, an India Out campaign in countries suitable to have them. America has more covert systems, NGOs, the guise of educational institutions, youth, art, rap music, satire. Are these riots orchestrated? Is there no seed of truth to what causes them? That will never be true. There will always be a population of the unsatisfied. There is always a seed of organic resentment against any government in a democracy. What matters is the pattern. From Serbia to Ukraine, from Sri Lanka to Nepal, the same patterns, the same symbols repeat. Music, memes, and mobs. And the results are the same. Governments fall, societies collapse, people are killed, humans live and behave as animals. The headlines move on quickly. One day it is the riots in Nepal and the world is concerned. Another day it is the bombing of a West Asian nation. And yet another day it is the shooting of a conservative leader in a nation far away. The beheading of an Indian who merely existed and did his job and looked out for his family. This channel will not be about chasing headlines. I will be looking for the analysis behind them. I would love for you to join me and delve a little deeper Read the material that I've produced, linked below. I've been a columnist for several years. I'm used to the research, and if this is the sort of video that you've watched thus far, there is no way that you will not be interested in the textual presentation of the facts. If you value this work, do like and subscribe. They're both free. If you would like to contribute further, do consider using the QR code below. It would mean a lot to this channel and for me to dive deeper into topics of global concern, especially from an Indian perspective, which does not exist on the internet much. This was an attempt to look beyond the noise to the patterns shaping our world. I hope you found it useful. I'll see you next time.